Welcome to episode number 9 of the Hike Files podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Zitzelman. What's going on? It's been story time for the last 2 weeks. Going to change it up this week. Going to talk a little bit about a revamped project that I did a few years ago that you may be familiar with. And then I'm going to do a question and answer session. I'm going to pull questions from videos from over on Kurt Zitzelman Outdoors. But to change it up a little bit, I'm not going to ask myself the questions. I'm going to have those questions asked by AI. Now, if you've followed me for any length of time, if you're listening to this podcast because you follow me on Kurt Zitzelman Outdoors, you may remember my live streaming series called Outcast. It was, on Thursday nights I used to run this. I did 40 episodes of it. It was just a live stream. I would get on. I'd have sometimes have some things prepared to talk about that were outdoors related, but most of it was driven by live chat interaction. So people could log on, listen to me babble, and then ask questions, and I'd answer, and we'd have a little bit of a conversation back and forth that way. The original idea was to take those episodes and then pare down the audio to make it more of a podcast format. And then it was going to be season 3 of my other podcast, Primitive Intelligence. After 3 episodes, though, I realized it was really hard to get good audio out of that because in a live format, there's a lot more visual stuff. You're in front of a camera, you're showing gear, you're doing things like that, reading comments, typing back. There's a lot of dead airspace and also a lot of ums and ahs and things like that. Taking that audio and ripping it out and turning it into a podcast was harder than I thought because of all those dead airspaces, the ums, the ahs. I didn't have the time. So 3 episodes, I said, you know what? That's going to be it for the podcast version of it. So episode 3 of the Primitive Intelligence podcast, Outcast, was the final episode. I just didn't continue. I continued doing the live stream, but I just didn't continue ripping it down. Now, recently, I have been looking into AI, and one of the things I found was a program. Now, this is not an ad. I'm not getting paid for this, but the service is called Descript, and it takes audio, and you can take all the ums and ahs out of it. It will take all the long pauses out of it. It'll also try to scrub background noise, echo, bring the audio up, make it sound better. So let me give this a try. So I took a couple old episodes of Outcast, ran them through, and cleaned them up and really liked them. I wound up pulling the original 3 and redoing them, and then getting 13 more episodes and putting them into season 3. So there's a 16 episode season of Primitive Intelligence that is all outdoor Outcast related. So if you are a fan of that old live stream and you want to have a little nostalgia and you want to go back, go check that out. I'll put the link down the bottom to the Primitive Intelligence podcast. Look for season 3 and you can listen to it there. Now moving on. So if you're here because you got a mention on YouTube from a podcast that you never heard of, you've heard of me, or maybe you don't remember, but you asked a question on one of my videos over on Kurt Zitzelman Outdoors, and the question is something that might pertain to more people, so I figured I'd answer it here. I only pulled a few. We'll see how this goes. I do have AI asking the question, and what I'm using is a service from Amazon called Poly, and I'm doing this is simply to break it up. I know when you're listening to one person on a podcast, the questions and the answers can kind of meld together and there's no real separation. So I'm trying to make this so it flows a little nicer and it's a little more interesting to listen to. So let's get right into it. This is, I think the Amazon voice is called Sally. So this is the Hike Files AI question bot, Sally, asking the questions. And let's jump right into them.
From the video, Solo on the Thunder Swamp Trail, Delaware State Forest. At Gallons Wigart commented, awesome video. Do you remember which lot you parked in? And do you know of a map detailing the campsites? I'm unable to find a map online that shows where the campsites are located.
All right, and I know there's that question, and then there was a second question on that same video that's along the same line, so let's listen to that one too.
And from the same video, at 150F 2011 commented, "Hello, I have the map and guide for this trail. Can you tell me about on the map where you camped on this video? Maybe use a mileage marker for reference. Thanks."
So the Thunder Swamp Trail is 30 to 31 miles, something like that, down in Delaware State Forest. It's a loop with a lollipop on it. So it's like a 20-mile loop, and then there's like a 10 or 11-mile lollipop spur on the northeast corner of it. It's kind of oddly shaped. And there are some Delaware State Forest, like official maps for it, but they only show the trail. They don't show any campsites. And there are a lot of road crossings. Well, let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's like 5 main roads that you cross around the whole loop. And there's parking spots at each one. There's 2 kind of main parking areas. There's the one up at Lake Minnesink, which is up near that spur, which is a pretty good sized parking lot. And that lot is more used in the winter for snowmobilers because there are snowmobile trails that come off of there as well. On the southern bottom end of that main loop, off of Route 402, is the main trailhead. And that's where I parked for this particular trip. It's a huge lot. It holds like 40 cars. If you go to Google Maps and you search for Thunder Swamp Trailhead, it'll take you to that spot. I'll also put the Google Maps coordinates in the show notes so you can go right to it. That is the main trailhead. There's a decent kiosk there. There's usually maps there. Like I said, plenty of parking. So that's where I parked from. Like I said, the official map does a good job outlining the trail, but it doesn't show any kind of campsites. The best map I found for campsites and trail is from the guidebook. If you can go find the book. I'll see if I can find a link for it and put it down in the bottom as well. It's simply called A Guide to the Thunder Swamp Trail, and it's by Ben Kramer. It does come with a really nice paper map that shows the main loop and then that spur loop. Shows them separately, each with their own mileage, each with campsites on them. So that is the map the second viewer was talking about. In that video, on that map, on the spur, I camped near mile 4 over by, I think it's called Big Bear Swamp. So it's a really nice hiking trail. It is hard to find campsites if you don't know where you're looking. Of course, just hiking it, you'll come across plenty of them, but that map does show a lot. Let's move on.
Next, from the video, car camping overnight with the Adventure Hammock Systems Bare Bones XL. At Mitchelldemont 4619 asked, when you mentioned the price, was that in Canadian or US dollars? Great clip. Thanks for sharing.
Something I don't think about when I'm recording is that people from other countries might actually watch. It's not, when you're sitting in your home or you're out on a local trail and you're hiking, you don't think that people from all around the world are going to watch this. So I kind of forget. But I am in the U.S. I'm in Pennsylvania. So all my prices that I talk about for any gear that I'm looking at is always in U.S. dollars. I always do feet in miles per hour in Fahrenheit. It's just an American thing. We don't know any better, so that's what we use. So yeah, anything that I'm using measurements for are U.S. based, whether it's dollars or distance.
Next up we have this question from the video, Return to Brady's Lake. At PHOOZOO asked, does it require a boat or launch permit for a kayak?
Yes. So this is an answer for Pennsylvania only. Other states are different, and I'll talk a little bit about that now. But in Pennsylvania, if you're using state-controlled or state-maintained waters in places such as state parks, state forests, state game lands, or properties owned by Fish and Boat Commission, anything that is state-owned and maintained, you do need a launch permit, a mooring permit, or a registration. Any one of those 3 will work. A registration for human-powered craft, hand launch, like canoes or kayaks, registration isn't necessary because there's no motor. It just gets a little more information on your boat. So if it gets stolen or something like that, then there's a little more information to look for. The launch permit and the mooring permit are very similar. A mooring permit just gives you permission to leave your boat on state land. That you basically rent a slip, and then you can leave your boat there. It is your responsibility to make sure it's secure, but then you don't have to have a spot to store it yourself during the summer. So a launch permit is for any of that state-owned land. You can either use the sticker from the DCNR or from Fish and Boat. They're a little bit different looking. The DCNR's is one big sticker, and Fish and Boat gives you two little square stickers. You put one on the front, one on the back. They do the same thing. They give you same access to the same lands. It's just two different people that are getting paid. You only need one from one of those. You don't need to have one of each of these, just one from one of these things. Right now, as of 2023, that cost is $22 for a 2-year permit. And I know I hear it a lot. As soon as they tell people that, they go, oh, I can't believe I got to pay. And I already bought the boat. Why do I got to pay to use it? So the basic answer is you're going to pay for it one way or the other. The land and everything that you're using needs to be maintained. People need to be paid. In other states where you don't have to have a launch permit or anything like that for a kayak or canoe, if you're using state-owned land, you pay just to enter that land. In New York State, I know there's state parks. You pay to get in. In Florida, I lived in Florida for 6.5 years. Every time I wanted to go kayaking and I wanted to use the boat launch in a state park, I paid like $4 to $6 per entry to get in there and kayak. If you kayak enough, over the course of the 2 years of that launch permit, you're paying way more money just to access those lands every time you go in. So, like I said, you pay for it one way or the other. It's something you need to have. It's cheaper than the citation they're going to give you. I've seen employees from DCNR, from the Park Service, from the Forest Service, and from Fish and Boat all give tickets to people for not having registrations on their boats. I've almost gotten them because they didn't see my sticker. I had a Fish and Boat guy start writing the ticket out. And I go, what are you doing? He goes, you don't have a sticker. And I pointed it out. It says right here. And it was a DCNR sticker, not one of theirs. And he's like, oh, I forgot about that one. So he ripped it up. I didn't get the ticket, but they are paying attention. So yeah, sure, it's an inconvenience, but for $22 for 2 years, it's really not that bad.
This next one was asked about the video, did I find the perfect local primitive camp? At Alpha Kinney Body 2583 wanted to know, do you ever carry in case you meet a bear or an apex predator?
The simple answer to that question is no. I do carry a knife with me. In the Northeast, where I spend 99% of my time camping and hiking and backpacking, there is, other than people, there's really nothing else in the forest that makes me worried about my safety. I've encountered so many bears in my life, and I've never felt threatened by one. I've been in areas where I didn't want to surprise a bear. You know, it's the time of year where they might be a little more aggressive. They might have cubs around, or they're getting ready to hibernate. They're a little more easily aggravated. And I know it's an area where there might be a lot of bears. So I'll announce myself just because I don't want to surprise one. And I think that's where a lot of problems arise when people just come barreling into a spot. A bear's minding its own business, doing its thing, and all of a sudden there's a person and everybody freaks out and bad things happen. Black bears have never really, I'm respectful of them, but I'm not afraid of them. We don't really have any other apex predators in the state. We do have, I know unofficially they say no, we don't have mountain lions. I've seen the evidence of them. There are mountain lions in Pennsylvania. There's not many, but there are a few. There's spots where I've seen them. I mean, bobcats don't have paw prints the size of my hand, and they don't have tails. So they are around. There's no official acknowledgement of that, but they are around. So what do we have? Bobcats? Not my story, but someone that I used to know was in local woods. I think he was hunting. I think he was like hunting turkey or pheasant or something like that. He was hunting like small, like game birds. And so he's out and he hears something on the other side of a downed tree moving around. So he's like, oh, there's something over there. So he kind of sits down and he's getting his stuff ready. And he's like, trying to plan out where he's going to go. He's trying to see where this thing goes. And as he's sitting there, he's kind of leaned over and getting his gear together. It jumps over. It was a bobcat. It jumps over the log or the down tree, whatever it was, jumps over and lands on his back. Now, the bobcat must have heard him over there, thinking it was like a snack. He heard it thinking it was something he could hunt. It landed on his shoulders. It kind of looked around the side of his head and looked at him like, holy crap, you're not a chipmunk, and just took off. Like, didn't try to attack him. Didn't hurt him. They were both just as surprised by each other, and they kind of went opposite ways. I mean, and what else do we have? Coyotes. Coyotes are just dogs. I know they get a bad rap. Farmers don't like coyotes because they go after their chickens and their ducks and their livestock, and I understand that. But for the average person, a coyote isn't gonna bother you. The campsite I use very often over in Pinchot State Forest has got a pack of coyotes that have taken up residence in a field right nearby. I have them run through camp all the time, and it's just because they use that little stretch of land as a pathway. So I see them go by, and they just kind of look at me like, hey, passing through, and they keep going. I've never been bothered by a coyote. So, in short, nope, I don't carry anything. Now, if I was hiking or camping or backpacking out where there's grizzly bears, then yeah, I would definitely consider carrying a weapon more than just a knife, because black bears are not that aggressive. In the grand scheme of things with bears, black bears are like giant dogs with a 5-year-old's mentality, and grizzly bears are just mean. I would not want to mess with a grizzly bear.
From the video, February hammock camping, Pinchot State Forest. At TMAC8435 asked, do you have to pay to camp on those sites?
Yes, is the answer now. The reason why I include this one is this question was asked a few years ago, and the answer has changed. I think all the state forest regions in Pennsylvania have these drive-up campsites that are reservable, and they used to be free. Some forests had more than others, but I think they all had a few. So the way it used to be done is you'd contact that state forest's office, and you'd say, hey, I want to rent this campsite on this day. And if they only had a handful, it was pretty easy for them to go through and say, okay, it's available. But some areas like Delaware State Forest has, I don't know, 30 or 40, something like that, a bunch of these campsites. And what you would have to do is they didn't want you to call. They wanted you to send them an email with a list of campsites that you wanted in order of your priority. And then it might take a week for them to get back to you and say, okay, your fifth in line is the first one that's available. So you didn't know exactly which one you were going to get, or if you get any of them. What they did is they moved all that over to the Reserve America system, and so now there's a fee. It's $10 to rent it. There's a $6 fee from Reserve America, and then taxes. So it winds up being like $19, $20, something like that. And there might be an out-of-state fee too, like a non-resident fee. I'm not sure about that. But so it's all done online now. You know immediately if it's available. So this is another thing like the kayak and canoe launch permits, where I get why people are upset about this, because it used to be free and now it's not. But remember, these sites do need to be maintained. The reservations need to be kept. And if it was taking a week for them to research all these reservations, that's a lot of time to spend. So I get why people are upset, but I also get why it needs to happen. There was also another issue, and I've had a few people not argue with me, but kind of disagree. But I know this happened on a few occasions. I talked to forest employees, and they confirmed that this was happening. Let's say I reserved with the free reservation. I said, okay, I want to be at campsite number 1 on Saturday. And then on Saturday, I go out to campsite number 1, and there's somebody in that campsite. And you say, hey, look, I got the reservation. And they're like, well, there was nobody here when I got here, so it's first come, first serve, right? No, that's not how it works. And then there'd be this altercation. Somebody would have to pack down and leave, or they'd say they're not leaving. This was happening in spots, and people were just going out and using these campsites without having written permission, which, look, I get it. It's free and you should be able to do it. Whatever. That's not the argument we're having here. There were times where myself and Rocco, we reached out. We got the permit. We never actually got it in our hands. They never emailed it to us. So we weren't sure. So we went somewhere else. We went and backpacked in and, went primitive camping instead of going to that campsite. Without the permit in hand, I wouldn't go to one of those campsites. I can understand why people are upset about it, but it is something that needs to happen. Unfortunately, free camping is now limited to the backpacking. And hopefully it stays that way. That's it for the questions, but I do want to address one other video of mine that gets a lot of comments, and I just want to talk about it for a little bit, just for a minute here. I did a video on the 4 Patriots 72-hour survival meal kit, or whatever they call it. I don't have the name of it right in front of me. I saw it on Amazon. I was looking for an alternative to for backpacking food, right? And it seemed pretty cheap for what you were getting. And one of the things it said it was ideal for was camping and backpacking. Said it right in the description. Ideal for camping and backpacking. Now, when I hear 72-hour meal kit, I think 3 days. So you're going to have a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner for each day. And in my mind, if it's a survival kit, you're going to want to keep those sealed as long as possible. So you're going to have a breakfast, like 3 breakfasts individually sealed, 3 lunches individually sealed, and 3 dinners individually sealed. That's what I'm thinking. So I order it. It shows up. I open the box and I can immediately smell food. I can immediately smell something. And I'm like, well, that's not right. That's not sealed. And there's like a main bag. I open it up and then there's only 3 bags inside. So I pull the 3 bags out. I'm like, are there bags inside these bags? Is it like a nesting doll here? Is there like a bag with a bag with a bag? So I look at them and no, they just gave you 3. They gave you 1 bag of breakfast, 1 bag of lunch, 1 bag of dinner. And you had the directions were to cook them all at once. And I'm thinking that makes no sense. And then I look at the servings and there's like 8 servings of breakfast and then 4 servings of lunch and 4 servings of dinner. And the calorie count is still way lower than it needs to be. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then the cooking instructions it's not dehydrated. They say it's dehydrated food. It's boxed food is what it is. So I tried it as backpacking food because they said it was doable for that. So we were doing a short backpacking trip. I took it with me. Now I understand taste is a relative thing, right? But it was disgusting. I couldn't eat it. I thought, well, I am preparing it incorrectly, not to the way they say on the bag, because you need to have X amount of water and you got to boil it and you got to let it sit and you got to stir it and you got to let it sit and you got to stir it. You got to do like 20 minutes of cooking it. For backpacking, that doesn't really work. So I'm like, all right, maybe I'm just being unfair. So I got home and I still had some left and I prepared it the way it said on the box. And it prepared better, obviously, but it was still disgusting. And it didn't change the fact that the servings were all messed up and it was all packaged in a way that you had to make it all at once, or it was designed to be made all at once. And my thought is, if you're in an emergency situation and you have no power and you've got to make 8 servings of oatmeal at once to last you for 3 days, have you ever had day-old oatmeal? Ew, no one's eating that. And if you have no electricity, how are you going to keep it for? You going to throw that in the cooler? And you're going to do that for your breakfast, lunch, and dinner? It just poorly done. So it was a pretty long video. And I think people would get partway through and they would just get mad because maybe they bought it or they really want to believe that 4 Patriots is selling them good things. And they would immediately comment about, blasting me about whatever, the way I prepared it or something I said about it. And they, without watching the entire video, seeing that I do go back and do it the right way. And, I'm trying to be fair about it. The thing that always gets me with that, though, is that maybe you're not aware of this, but when you comment on a video in YouTube, and you hit enter or send, it immediately sends an email to the creator saying that you commented on a video and this is what the comment is. Even if you go back and delete it, that email remains. So there's people who have said things and then gone back, deleted it, or edited the comment like, oh, no, I didn't watch the whole video. Go, and the creator knows. Just so you're aware, we know. This isn't a specific question on the product or the video, but this is more a comment from me to you that just because a product is labeled a certain way and sold by a company who's saying a certain thing doesn't necessarily mean that's the truth. Anything like that for survival, I always just buy a test first. Don't go out and spend thousands of dollars on 6 months worth of food and then just put it away and be like, I'm good. I'm ready for the apocalypse. I don't know 4-pagers. I don't know who they are. All I know is the product that I tested. And when I look at their products online, I don't see good products. I just don't. The food was no good. The other thing I see that they're pushing now is a solar generator, right? Air quotes. There's only one thing that could be considered a solar generator, and that is a star. What they're selling you is a giant battery pack, and you got to look at what that is capable of compared to the competitors, because they're charging a lot of money for a giant battery backup, and they're selling it as a generator. Like, you can just set it there and it's going to work. No, that thing, it needs a lot of solar power. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's not a generator. It's a battery bank. So they advertise it as a thing, and I don't think they're thinking past the sale. That's what it seems like to me. Just use discretion when you're looking at products, especially when it comes to outdoor. For safety or survival, they are important, and you need to do your due diligence. And that's all I'm going to say on that. If you have questions and you want to hear them answered on the podcast, or you want to see them answered in a video, feel free to reach out, comment on a video, send me an email, whatever you want to do. I'd love to hear from you. That's going to do it for me. I'm going to talk to you next week in episode 10 of the Hike Files podcast.